It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Andy Thomson.
On the dogmas of religion as compared to moral principles. All mankind, from the beginning of the world to the present day, have been fighting, quarreling, burning, and torturing one another for abstractions unintelligible to themselves and to all others, and absolutely beyond the comprehension of the human mind. Thomas Jefferson wrote those words in 1816. And if I do my work well today, if you should come upon somebody like Mr. Jefferson next week who says religion is beyond the comprehension of the human mind, you can say no. Religion is now understood. What few people realize is that we now have the foundation for a comprehensive psychological science of religious belief. We have it. It's there. And what I hope to do is to show that to you this afternoon. What Mr. Jefferson did not know in 1816 when he wrote those words was that at that time there was a 7-year-old boy in England who would revolutionize our understanding of all life on earth, but also our understanding of the human mind. And that was, of course, Charles Darwin. The most brilliant idea probably ever a human mind had. And few people realize that it was also Darwin that changed our understanding of the human mind and triggered the cognitive neuroscience revolution, one of the outgrowths of which is this understanding of religious belief. And my plan for this afternoon is the following. I am going to give you the modern Darwinian synthesis as it relates to the human mind. We'll do a little bit of human evolution to also show some important things about the origins of religion. And then we're going to do kind of an anatomy dissection and look at the various pieces of the cognition of religion, the mechanisms that humans use. We now know why human minds generate religious beliefs, why they generate the religious beliefs that we do see. We know the mechanisms. And I'm going to give you an introduction to some of that. And then we're going to shift and do a similar sort of dissection on the neurobiology of ritual. But before I do that, there are a number of people I want to thank. First and foremost, Bill Lizardwood. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for this conference. It's been wonderful so far. I really appreciate it. Also, I think it's time to thank Kathy Lizardwood, the other organizers, Scott Bergman here on the AV. Thank you for all your efforts. Also, I wouldn't be here were it not for Richard Dawkins and the opportunity to work for his foundation, and Robin Cornwell, the executive director, Mike Cornwell, the other people at the foundation. Keep your eye on our website. We're about to launch a new one that I hope you will use. You'll be able to put, if you're going to Winnipeg, you can put in Winnipeg and you'll see all the meetups and the organizations and the speakers that are there. We literally hope it's going to be, certainly North America, Europe, and the idea is to think global, act local, put your organization information, your meetings, your speakers on our website. This should be up in about a month. I also want to thank my co-author, Claire Alcafer. Some of the ideas you will hear today are hers. Also, as I go through this, have a pen and pencil, paper ready. I'll try to suggest to you some things that you may not have read yet that I think you'll find informative and enjoyable to read. All right, let's get started. Darwin's idea. Again, remarkably simple, remarkably powerful. And if you take Darwin's idea of evolution by natural selection and you combine it with genetics, this is Watson and Crick at the time that they mapped out the double helix. Anybody know what you get when you combine Darwin and Watson and Crick? Anybody? This is what you get. The modern Darwinian synthesis, the selfish gene, This is, I think, a nice summary of it. I think anybody graduating from high school should know this. This is from Don Simons. Every single organism, plant or animal, bacteria, you name it, any part of life, is an integrated collection of problem-solving devices designed by natural selection over evolutionary time to promote in some specific way the survival of the genes that built that adaptation, those adaptations. So, my heart solves the problem of pumping blood. Hemoglobin solves the problem of transporting oxygen. My lungs solve the problem of extracting the oxygen from the air. At every single level of biological inquiry, from membranes to minds, Darwinian natural selection, the modern Darwinian synthesis. Now, there's another reason this is up here, and I think you want to know it. Because this is also a statement about the human mind. The mind is what the brain does. The brain is this integrated collection of problem-solving devices, adaptations, designed over evolutionary time by natural selection to promote the survival of the genes that built those adaptations. Another way of thinking about it is the human mind is like the Apollo spacecraft. What's the Apollo spacecraft? It's this integrated collection of engineering devices that are solving a constant stream of problems, only a few of which are conscious to the astronauts. That's the way your mind is. You're looking at me, I'm an upside-down, two-dimensional image on your retina. Myriad adaptations are converting that into the three-dimensional view you have. But also, what we're going to be talking about are social adaptations. Social adaptations that go into building religion. This morning you heard from August about morality, and what I'm going to show you is that our moral inferential systems are adaptations. Other animals have them, and they help solve the problem of group living, the problems of group living for social species like ourselves. Now, let's look at human evolution just for a few moments. And again, Darwin's genius was profound, and he knew early on that our ancestors were probably apes in Africa. He wrote it for the first time in The Descent of Man. I think he thought of it long before that. It is clear. We are risen apes, not fallen angels. The genetics, the fossils are all clear. From now on, when somebody asks you where you're from, this is what you say: Africa. Somebody says, what? Yeah, probably somewhere in the Rift Valley. And you want to think of this is the Rift. It's kind of tiny. At any rate, the Rift Valley runs from Somalia down to Mozambique. You want to think of this as the birth canal of the human species. Africa is in our blood. Africa has our bones. We are all Africans. Now, next time you go to your physician and he says, what's your family history? I want you to give him this, all right? And here's a convenient way to think about it. Let's just pretend for a moment that my arms are 4 billion years of life. So life begins here, replicating molecules, probably RNA-like. Matt Ridley makes the case that all of us, on chromosome 1, carry the descendant of that original replicating molecule. I just still find that extraordinary. So, life is unicellular organisms. The extraordinary evolution of the machinery of the cell. So about here, a billion years ago. Why am I going over this? A billion years ago, serotonin. The original monoamine neurotransmitter, this is what we boost with Prozac, present in all nervous systems, crucial to religious ritual. Shortly afterwards, dopamine, norepinephrine, oxytocin, endorphins, we'll be talking about them. Present in almost all central nervous systems, crucial to religious rituals. So, cells come together, central nervous systems, think tapeworm. Dinosaurs show up about here. Dinosaurs go extinct about the last digit on my finger. And this is where this begins. So this is the last digit of my finger. Dinosaurs extinct, mammals that are now starting to flourish, and our ancestors, monkeys. Now, this is important because in mammals, the attachment system, which we'll be talking about, and as we get into primates, more and more cooperation. Our eyes move from the side of the head to the front of the head. We need somebody to watch our back. Starting to look even more specifically at agency detection and rudimentary theory of mind, all crucial to religion in even our monkey ancestors. Little girl comes home from her science class, says to her mother, "Oh, we had evolution today. Mom, do we really come from monkeys?" Her mother says, "Well, yeah." And she says, "Well, Mom, where do monkeys come from?" And the mother thinks for a minute, says, "Kansas State Board of Education." Now, I don't know if it'll show up, but I want you to, just this little twig right here on the bush, this is our common ancestor with chimps and bonobos, this little twig on the bush. So if the physician gets frustrated when he says, "No, I want your immediate family history," then you give him this, all right? And this is hominid evolution since our common ancestor with chimps and bonobos. And you can see it, Ardipithecus at the bottom, 4 or 5 million years ago, Lucy, Australopithecines, and then Panthropus, and the top is the last 2 million years, Homo. Physician says, "No, come on, I want your immediate family history, so you give them this." And this is the last 2 million years, and this is a crucial transition, and very important to what led to religion, as you'll see. 2 million years ago, our genus evolves, Homo habilis, Homo erectus. Almost 2 million years ago, probably Homo erectus made it out of Africa. We know Homo erectus made it all the way to China, Indonesia, up to the Caucasus Mountains. Now, they'd conquered the physical environment, so they had left Africa and already spread out millions of years ago, or I think 1.8 million years ago. Homo heidelbergensis in Africa leaves 600,000 years ago. A branch becomes the Neanderthals. The African Homo heidelbergensis is probably our most direct ancestor, and we show up about 200,000 years ago. And probably the coasts of Africa, and there was tremendous climate change probably. And modern Homo sapiens, you and I, our ancestors, probably the genetics suggest that we got down to between 600 and 2,000 breeding individuals and survived those climate changes and then left Africa about 50,000 years ago. And it may have been a population as small as one wave of about 150 people that crossed the gates of grief at the bottom of the Red Sea that left Africa and is the foundation population for those that went into Asia and Europe and the rest of the world. So we then move around the world, and we're the last surviving hominid. And the picture is getting more and more interesting. And I would encourage you to look at the May 3rd Nature. And I think you may be able to access the articles without a subscription. It's a special issue on peopling the planet. And in Siberia, there's a cave, the Denisova Cave, and it had a tiny fragment, and it turns out that it was, I think, a molar and a finger bone, and it turns out looks like it's a separate species. And in that cave lived Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern Homo sapiens. And this currently looks like the genetic picture, and that small group of Homo sapiens that left Africa bred with Neanderthals briefly, because all Europeans, all Asians, we carry about 2.5% Neanderthal in our genome, and the Denisovans look like they mated with the people that went to Australia and New Guinea. They have a genome, part of the Denisovan genome is in them, and apparently contributes to their immune system significantly. And I think you'll love that. If you can get your hands on that issue, you will love it. And why I'm going through this is because, as you'll see, the populations that spread out and went east are crucial to understanding the earliest religions. Now, I don't know if this means if those in the Middle East and us, the descendants, have 2.5% of our genome as Neanderthal, does that mean Jesus only had 1.25? But it gets even, I think, more interesting. And I think you as Canadians would be interested in this. It now appears, this is the standard picture is that people from Siberia moved across the Bering Straits and peopled North and South America. There's now evidence that the French were the first here. The Soltrian populations in France and Spain, the Soltrian era was 26,000 years ago to 19,000 years ago. And it looks as if some of them made it to North America maybe 20,000 years ago. There's 6 different sites. There's French flint from areas in France. And if you're interested in this, Google across Arctic ice. I think Dennis Stanford, Bruce Bradley, and the news articles on their book. Fascinating. I particularly like this because one of the sites is near the very Christian capital of the Confederacy, Richmond, and there's something to me haunting about the fact that 18,000 years before Christ, there were Soltrian hunter-gatherers in the areas of Virginia around Richmond. But bottom line is this. All 7 billion people on the earth today are descendants of that small hunter-gatherer population, as few as maybe 600 to 2,000 individuals that lived in Africa 50,000 years ago. So, put aside our racial differences, our ethnic differences, religious differences, put them all aside. All of us, all 7 billion of us, are the sons and daughters of that small hunter-gatherer population that somehow survived massive climate change 50,000 years ago. And one thing we notice is that there was things are slow over evolutionary time, but in the hominid species, there was relatively rapid brain evolution. And you can see Lucy at the top, Homo erectus in the middle. Remember, Homo erectus left Africa and made it all the way to Indonesia, and then us. This shows it a little bit better. And notice particularly the areas of the frontal lobe, because that's where the greatest expansion was, in our frontal lobes. So, what drove this dramatic brain evolution, particularly in the frontal lobes? Now remember, we had already conquered the physical environment. We'd already spread out into the Caucasus, to Indonesia, as Homo erectus. So what were the selection pressures? What was the part of the environment? What was the toughest, most challenging, difficult part of the environment that drove this rapid brain evolution? Well, it was each other. And that rapid brain evolution had to do with dealing with the complexities of social relationships. You want to think of the brain as a social brain. Frontal lobe contains all these mechanisms for our social cognitions. And it is these social cognitions that form the basis of religious ideas. This is what goes into the cognition, the psychology of religion. So all religious ideas are basically extraordinary utilization of, I think, some extraordinary social cognitions that originally evolved for other reasons. And they come together to create religious ideas. And that religious ideas are a byproduct of these mechanisms that originally evolved for other purposes. Now, a lot of people say, well, byproduct sounds kind of weak. Well, it's not. Keep in mind that reading and writing is a cultural creation. It is a cultural byproduct of other adaptations. We don't have reading and writing modules in our brain. It is a byproduct of fine motor skills, language, vision, and I don't think anybody would say that reading and writing, that cultural creation, is something weak and insignificant. It has obviously been dramatic, as has religion. Now, how many of you here at times crave a junk food meal? Certainly. How many of you, would a juicy steak, crave a juicy steak? Or how many of you today, if you had the choice between the brownies that were at lunch or fruit, how many would choose the brownies? Of course. What I want to show you is that if you understand the psychology of junk food, you will understand the psychology of religion. It is fundamentally the same. No, I'm serious, and I promise to show you that. All of us have, no, let me back. How many of you here crave broccoli? Well, there's variation within a species, but you see it's very few, all right? And atheists are outliers anyway. But most of us don't have cravings for broccoli because our ancestors had plenty of tubers. So we developed cravings for things that were rare and crucial for our survival. We have cravings for fat, and that was originally the fat of lean game meat because it was a high source of calories, it was a crucial source of proteins. But the modern world and junk food arises from that adaptation, but gives it back to us in a supernormal stimuli. It gives us the Big Mac hamburger. It gives us the French fries soaked in meat juice. And so so I get a big hit of dopamine in my pleasure centers. We all have cravings for sweets, but those were originally the sweets of ripe fruit, because ripe fruit was a crucial source of vitamin C, crucial source of calories. So junk food comes from that adaptation, but then it comes back at us in a supernormal stimuli. I'm never going to get a dopamine hit off of an apple like I'm going to get off of a brownie. And so this is the basics, really the fundamental structure of the cognition of religious belief. And we'll talk about it. The attachment system. The attachment system is crucial to all of us. And what does a 2-year-old do when he or she is distressed? The 2-year-old walks over to you and goes like this, "Pick me up." Okay? This is what you see in Pentecostal worshipers. Reaching up to a caretaker is that basic attachment mechanism. And so you'll see, I hope as we go through this, that religion comes from these adaptations, like the attachment system, but then comes back to us in a supernormal stimuli. Not an ordinary parent, but a super parent. So, I hope I've shown the point and given you the... So I hope you understand religion. The psychology of religion is the same as the psychology of junk food. A guy in Ireland sent this to me. It's just wonderful, isn't it? But joking aside, I don't think we should forget this gentleman has run a virtual army of child molesters who have escaped prosecution. I'm from the South, I'm sorry. There's an estimated, and I think it's a conservative estimate, 100,000 victims worldwide. And I don't think we yet know all the victims. And I'm a mental health professional, but I don't think you have to be a mental health professional to know the unspeakable damage, and sometimes the permanent damage that child rape does to an individual. And so I feel strongly that as secular organizations, we should not rest until these individuals are brought to justice. So what I'm going to do now is just to go through some of these mechanisms. And we're going to talk about, these to me are sort of the big 7. And the mnemonic would be damn it or damn MIT, decoupled cognition, the attachment system, agency detection, minimally counterintuitive worlds, our moral inferential system, something called intentionality, and then theory of mind. And I'm going to give you some of those. And these are some of the others that are also important. And these are the cognitive adaptations that were originally designed for other purposes, which come together to create religious beliefs. Now, decoupled cognition. There's 2 decouplings, one in time and place, and this is a fancy word for the following. I know since I've been talking, all of you here have thought about a conversation you had with somebody yesterday, or more likely you're thinking about a conversation you want to have with somebody later or this week. You may think about a question that you want to ask me later, but you're having a complex social interaction with an unseen other. We take it for granted, but it's actually extraordinary cognitive software. Okay? We can decouple in time and place and carry on a complicated interaction with an unseen other. Now, right now, I can ask all of you to imagine in your mind a conversation with Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister, and to ask the Prime Minister for something, and maybe you give him something in return. You know, to say, please, base policy on evidence, not ideology. Maybe, stop funneling money to the pro-life organizations. But my point is, when I asked you to do that, all of you could do it instantly. Okay, you could, decouple and have a complicated social interaction with an unseen other. And as I hope you saw, I had you do it with an authority figure, had you do it with, in a sense, kind of a prayer. Would you please do something? Maybe offer something in return, reciprocity. And so I hope you're starting to see that what goes on is that religion, as bizarre as it may seem at times, is really just one step removed from everyday, ordinary cognitions that operate automatically, often unconsciously, that we take for granted. But this is what goes into the building blocks of religion. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting old enough that a lot of those near and dear to me have died, and I still catch myself talking to them in my head. And so you can see it's just one small step to ancestor worship. Now, the second part of decoupled cognition is really the split between mind and body. It's called dualism. And this is sort of the midline cut of your brain. Let me try to illustrate it a little bit better. Imagine this is your brain, actually your brain with a knife in it, imagine that this is your brain for a second, and what I'm going to do is we're going to look at what this picture is, which is the right hemisphere of your brain, and this area right here, the medial prefrontal cortex, this is where you perceive your own thoughts and feelings, where you perceive other people's thoughts and feelings. The non-physical attributes in the medial part of your frontal cortex, whereas you perceive your own body and the body of others in the lateral cortexes. So this mind-body split is built into the very anatomy of your brain. Why is this important? Well, because from the get-go, we experience mind and bodies as separate. So the default setting of our minds is that minds are separate from bodies, and you can see that it's just one small step to the idea of souls. And this is crucial because if I had to have August in front of me to think about what's going on in his mind, that would be a real inconvenience. I need to be able to think about August when he's not here. And think about an email I may need to send him. We take this for granted. But as you can see, this is the default setting of our very neuroanatomy. And so again, it's just one small step to a concept in religion, the idea of souls, of life, minds basically floating free of bodies. Now, the attachment system. This is psychiatrist John Bowlby, psychologist Mary Ainsworth, who mapped out the attachment system in humans. If you're interested in this, look at Becoming Attached, an article by Robert Caron. It's still on the web. It was in the Atlantic magazine, now probably 15 years ago. Excellent introduction to the topic. And the attachment system is this basic caretaking system in all mammals and in us. And we use the attachment system also for friendships, for love relationships. And there's a haunting story, to me one of the most haunting stories in paleoanthropology. Alan Walker, the great paleoanthropologist who discovered Turkana Boy. If you read his book, The Wisdom of the Bones, there's also a little story in there about a Homo erectus woman the fossils that they found. She's 1.8 million years old. And it was clear that she had died of vitamin A poisoning. And that's a terrible way to die. You hemorrhage into your joints, you can't move, it's unbelievably painful. And when they were examining the fossils, they noticed that they were calcified. And suddenly it hit them that this woman had lived for weeks, months maybe, a long time. It meant that there were people taking care of her on the long, dark nights in the savannas. It's just a wonderful story in that book. The attachment system is crucial to religion. But what I want to show you is that it is also the attachment system that is heavily involved in the difficulties people have leaving religion. And we heard, for instance, in Matt's talk, some of the strain that his atheism has put on the relationship with his family. I talked to a young man last night who was brought up in fundamentalist family, and the strain of his leaving the family, the strain on his attachment system. And you also see this in Darwin's life. If you remember Darwin, the voyage of the Beagle was 1831 to 1836, and he came home, and he went on the voyage as a creationist. And he came home, he gave his birds to John Gould, the ornithologist, and in the spring of 1837, Gould comes back to him and says, these are 26 out of 27 are species that are unique, heretofore unknown. And Darwin realized in the spring of 1837 that species changed, that changed and changed through time. He saw that there was evolution. Gould's report shook him. And that's when he opened his famous notebook in the summer of 1837. He had seen that there was evolution, that species changed through time, but he did not have his mechanism. And in 1838, he became engaged to his first cousin, Emma Wedgwood. In September of 1838, he read Malthus's essay on population, and suddenly he had his mechanism for natural selection. Darwin had figured it out. He was 29 years of age. And he was engaged to his first cousin, and he told her, he must have told her about that idea, because a letter of hers survives, and she was clearly distressed. Darwin then marries Emma in January of 1839, and a year before he died, he was writing his autobiography, and he had carried another letter from Emma with him. And when he was finishing his autobiography, apparently, he wrote on the bottom of the letter the lines that you see. And there is no question but that Darwin's reluctance to publish his idea was involved in the strain he knew it would place on his relationship with his wife. And remember, Darwin's mother had died, and Emma was very much also a mother to him. And we know by the late 1840s, early 1850s, that on Sunday mornings, the family would walk to church, Emma and the children would go into the church, and Darwin would keep on walking. And it's that strain on his attachment system that you can see probably contributed to the delay of publication. This is, I think, one of the best statements of it. Carl Giberson, some of you may be familiar with, the physicist at Nazarene College, who's the Christian apologist trying to bring together evolution and Christianity. And I think this is one of the clearest statements of the issue. And so the attachment system is both crucial to religion, but also one of the things that makes it difficult to move away from. Now, minimally counterintuitive worlds. When you look at this, you see a square, but there are no lines there. You just fill it in. You assume that it's there. It's called inferential reasoning. And this is one of the things that underlies minimally counterintuitive worlds. What's that? If I tell you that this tree that's on the top of a hill here will do your taxes, will fix your computer, will take your car to the shop to get fixed, you're simply not going to believe me because there's too many violations of treeness. The fundamentals of treeness are just way too violated. But if I tell you that this tree, on the night of a full moon, will answer one wish from your daughter, you're going to be a little bit vulnerable to believing me. Maybe not this audience, but you actually will. At some level, it'll register. And it's because there's just one little twist with a human mind in it, but everything about treeness is left intact. And this is what constitutes minimally counterintuitive worlds. These are crucial to all religions and all fables and fairy tales. So this is why religions are also fairy tales. And minimally counterintuitive worlds in themselves aren't an adaptation so much as that they utilize our adaptation for having to focus on novelty and newness. The Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz. Why do we remember her? There's just one little twist. She can ride on a broom. But everything you know about mean, nasty old ladies is just there, left intact. And what are fairy tales and religions? They are minimally counterintuitive worlds that solve existential problems. The most watched movie of all time is The Wizard of Oz. Why? Because it's full of slight twists, it's minimally counterintuitive, and it solves two existential problems. The insecurities we all have when we grow up. Are we going to be smart enough? Are we going to be kind enough? Are we going to be courageous enough? And how are we going to deal with the inevitable finding out that our parents are not the powerful people that we thought they were? They're just ordinary humans. This is the basis of all fairy tales that we remember, all fables, and all religions. Minimally counterintuitive worlds. So, again, pick your favorite religion and just think about it. There's going to be maybe a shift in physical properties. So the Judeo-Christian God is everywhere. Now, that's a little twist. He's everywhere, but everything you know about surly old men is just left intact. Or a little twist in biology. Now, the Virgin Mary is a virgin birth, but everything else about young womanhood is left intact. Or there's a little twist in psychology. God knows my thoughts. He knows if I've been naughty or nice. He knows what I'm thinking. Okay, well, if he knows why I'm thinking, if he knows what I'm thinking, then why do I have to talk to him in prayer? Ordinary human conversation. Because all those aspects of humanness are just there, unacknowledged, but they're there. You fill them in, like you fill in the square. Now, one of the things that I think is just marvelous in this new cognitive neuroscience revolution is what it's doing with developmental psychology. And I would recommend to you Justin Barrett's new book, Born Believers, because what we see now is we can start to tease out these cognitive mechanisms in young children, in very young children. And we heard August today on morality. And last night in the debate, we heard the debaters saying, you can't have morality without God. Well, no. And this is some of the most, I think, interesting experiments in recent years. You can take 6-month-old children sitting on their mother's lap, and you can show they have capacities to make moral inferential decisions. They can make distinctions between a helper and a hinderer, a punisher and a helper. Look at Paul Bloom, The Moral Life of Babies, New York Times Magazine. Wonderful article, and you'll see this. And what we now know, part of the cognitive neuroscience revolution in morality, is we now know that our moral systems are adaptations, they're built into our brain, they're automatic, they're emotional, and we have to sort of work to rationalize or explain them later, and this is what religions hijack. When the fellow last night said, would you torture 2-year-olds, all of us at some level just instantly went, no, okay? It's just an automatic response. and then we sort of have to struggle to explain it. And religions take advantage of that because we can't consciously explain most of our moral decisions. They're automatic, they're unconscious, they're built into us, and they play out on these domains. These are the crucial domains for group living. And so our ancestors, this is what our moral emotions evolved around, these particular domains. And as August showed you today, other animals have it. I recommend the book he showed, Mark Burkhoff's, Wild Justice. And again, our moral inferential systems are adaptations that help solve the problem of group living. And they're deeply embedded in us. And religion, tries to tell us that we wouldn't be moral without them. That is clearly not the case. And I think this is one of the best statements that I've seen about the difference between genuine morality and religious morality. Now, intentionality. Can you all in the audience see the captions on the cartoon? Okay. What do you think I think about what you think I think you've been thinking about? Again, we just take this for granted, but it is very complex cognition when you start to tease it apart. And let me see if I can do it another way. First order would be, I hope. Second order would be, I hope August likes this talk. Third order would be, she knows, August knows, I hope he likes this talk. And that all of our social communications can be broken down into this, though for us, it's just automatic. We don't give it a second thought. This is part of the automatic mechanisms that we have as part of our social cognition. And again, you will see how religion utilizes this. I believe that God wants. I believe that God wants us to act with righteous intent. And then it goes into social and community religion. And this is called intentionality with an S. And again, I hope I'm starting to show you how these pieces that go into religion are part of our everyday, I think, extraordinary cognitions that are used for a different purpose. Now, remember when I showed you that transition between Australopithecines and Homo? And we suddenly get that big brain. Why? Well, it looks as if we somehow transitioned into what are called cooperative breeders. And our ape ancestors don't share their children because the children would get killed. And so they hold on to them very tight. But we became cooperative breeders, meaning we let others hold and take care of our children. And the woman in the middle is a Kung San mother who's just given birth, and she's given the child to her mother. And if you're interested in this, Sarah Hurdy's book, which just won an award called Mothers and Others, is one long argument that lays out how we became emotionally modern humans. And it's because infants then had selection pressures to try to figure out what other people thought, what they intended, what's going on in their minds. And it was that selection pressure that was generated by cooperative breeding that may have triggered that tremendous transition between Australopithecines and Homo, and was the original transition into what makes us emotionally modern humans. And this you are probably familiar with. It's called theory of mind. I think it's better called theory of feeling. I think that's a little bit closer to what it actually is. And so I can't see August's mind, but I need to generate all kinds of theories about what he might be thinking or feeling if I'm interacting with him. So I have all sorts of mechanisms to try to do that. And here's one of them. If you will look at the picture of Bogart on the right, on your left. Look at the picture of Bogart on your left. And you can see that Bogart is looking to his left. Now look at the other picture of Bogart. He's looking to his right. And go back and forth, and I hope you'll see that. But it's the same picture. I've just created a negative. And what I'm trying to do is show you, tease out that you have a separate dedicated mechanism that identifies eye gaze. Eye gaze is a particular way we try to figure out what's going on in somebody's mind. Now, look at these pictures and just use your gut. What is this individual feeling? Uneasy? How many think it's uneasy? Okay, uneasy, correct. What about this one? How many think it's playful? Okay, stop and think about it for a moment. You made accurate discrimination about complex emotional states based on grainy black and white photos of eyes. It's extraordinary. And I think this is one of the things that allowed our ancestors to leave Africa without language. Many of you are probably familiar with Sacha Baron Cohen, the movie actor. This is his first cousin, Simon Baron Cohen, who figured all this out. And that we have this ability with just on eye gaze alone. I mean, and there's more with faces and other things, voices and things, but just eye gaze alone, we can read 212 different complex emotional states. And he, I think, has figured out autism and Asperger's, which, that's deficiencies or defects in these theory of mind mechanisms. And theory of mind mechanisms are probably crucial to religion. And for instance, many of you know about Temple Grandin. She writes movingly about how she's got autism, for those that don't know about her, and she writes movingly about how she tried to be religious, she just couldn't. And some brilliant psychologists thought, wait a second, if theory of mind is crucial to religion, what do people with Asperger's and autism? Are they particularly religious? Lo and behold, you study them, and they just can't do religion. Jesse Baring's work, I highly recommend. Look at his book, The Belief Instinct, or his Scientific American Mind columns, Baring in Mind. And he has a wonderful experiment involving children and puppets. And he tells them it's just a puppet show, and he has an alligator eat a mouse. And then he asks the child, does the mouse still drink water? No. Does the mouse still eat grass? No. Does the mouse miss its mother? Yes. Is the mouse still angry at its brother? Yes. And what he shows, I think beautifully, again, we're learning so much from children, is that these mechanisms are there and clear to see in children, in that we just simply, our theory of mind mechanisms always stay turned on. And so this is part of acute grief. Somebody's dead. Part of your body, the natural kind modules, know that the person is dead, but your theory of mind mechanisms about that person never turn off. That's acute grief. The body's dead, their mind is still alive, you're still trying to talk to them. We really can't even imagine our own death. This is why we all plan our funerals. We think we're going to be there. But the theory of mind mechanisms are crucial to religious belief. Okay, that I hope is giving you just a taste of the mechanisms. And let me just show you some of what we've got as evidence. This is a study that I just love because it comes out of the National Institutes of Health during the Bush administration. And this is the first imaging study that didn't take outliers, just took ordinary Americans, religious, non-religious, put them in MRIs and had them read various religious statements. It's a beautiful study. And basically what they find is that religious belief basically utilizes these theory of mind mechanisms. There's no religious module in the brain. And I think this is one of the nicest pieces of evidence we have that shows that religion utilizes mechanisms already in the mind, and particularly the theory of mind mechanisms. Some of you may be aware of Sam Harris's work. Sam Harris has 2 beautiful fMRI studies, and either pull them up or look in Michael Shermer's book, The Believing Brain. He has a great summary of Sam's work and the implications. And one of the implications of Sam's studies, that religious belief is in that same part of our medial frontal cortex that has to do with our identity. Our religious beliefs are tied up with our identity. And why is this important? How many of you who were once believers have ever been argued out of your faith? You can't argue somebody out of it. Okay, it's part of their identity. And how many of you who were once believers, it took a long time of quiet reflection and reading and thinking? Right? And this is why, because you're having to undo your identity. Talked to a young man last night who talked about it took him years of reading and thinking and to move away. And you heard some, I think, similar to that from Matt. This is one of my favorite studies. Nicholas Epley at the University of Chicago Business School and some people at Monash University in Australia. And they took people and got them to talk about their attitudes on certain things like religious believers, their attitudes on gay marriage, on various things, homosexuality, then what they thought God's attitudes were, what they thought Bill Gates' attitudes were, Barry Bonds' attitudes. And what they showed was that when you think about your attitudes about a certain thing, a part of your brain lights up. When you think about God's attitude, same part of your brain lights up. Solid MRI evidence that for religious beliefs and attitudes, we're just projecting our own onto God. And read the paper. It's wonderful. And it's brilliant. They manipulated people's attitudes, and lo and behold, God's attitude changed along the same dimensions. Now, this is something that we're all appalled at times, that religions use, and this is called hard-to-fake, honest, costly signals of commitment. But again, it's part of everyday life. And because of language, we can lie. And I can't see the audience very well, but there's a young woman there. And if I tell her that I love her deeply and I want to marry her, why would she believe me? She probably shouldn't. But if I come up with a hard-to-fake, costly, honest signal of commitment, maybe she'll change her mind. Okay, but the point is here that religions again are utilizing mechanisms of everyday life. That's the cognition. Let's just turn briefly to rituals, and we're going to tease apart the neurobiology of ritual. And what I want to show you here is that the original religion, we have a window into it. The original religion of Homo sapiens, we have a window into it, and it is primarily ritual. It's primarily song and dance. And look at Nicholas Wade's book, The Faith Instinct. He lays this out, except the neurochemistry. We originate in Africa, the Thomson, closest population in Africa to the original population. We leave Africa, probably across the gates of grief, slowly move around the Indian subcontinent, and ultimately into New Guinea, Australia. But right here, the Andaman Islands. The Andaman Islanders were basically undiscovered, untouched until the 20th century. So the Thomson, the Andaman Islanders, the Australian Aborigines, the three populations that still survive that are the closest to our original ancestors in Africa. And guess what? Their religions are identical. And they're based on song, dance, and trance. But primarily song and dance that last hours. And the argument here is that they hijacked or basically discovered the biotechnology of group cohesion. And if you look at any religion, any of today's religions, you will see echoes of that original religion in it. And the Thomson, the Aborigines, it's intense physical activity, and there's no distinction between song and dance. They're one. And the first religion, very equal, no hierarchies, and this intense physical activity for 8, 10, 12 hours. I mean, long periods of time, all through the night. Now, why? And here's, I think, this is the essence, I think, of ritual and what solidifies these cognitive beliefs. Serotonin, the oldest monoamine neurotransmitter. You're sitting there quietly. Your serotonin neurons are going about 3 cycles a second. I'm up here moving around. Mine are going about 5 cycles a second. Serotonin with physical activity gets boosted. What does serotonin do? It enhances self-esteem. It also turns to an outward focus. I stop ruminating and stop being internally directed. So I've got outward focus. It boosts my self-esteem, lifts my mood. Norepinephrine, excitement, anxiety, fear also. Dopamine. Everybody thinks of dopamine as the pleasure neurotransmitter. It is, but also dopamine marks salience, memory. It enhances working memory. It tells you this is important. I need to attend to this and remember it. Oxytocin. We've all heard a lot about oxytocin, the trust hormone. A woman gives birth, massive outpouring of oxytocin to attach to that child. When you make love with your partner and have an orgasm, you have a release of oxytocin, enhances the binding. Endorphins. We think of endorphins as reducing pain, certainly, and one of its original designs. But endorphin also enhances bonding. If August would come here for just a second, well, just wait a second. I'll have you a second. Hold on. We'll use August here in a minute. But I'm going to talk about, I want to take that ritual here for a minute, the song and dance, all right? And we're going to just break it apart just for a minute into a couple of its pieces. One of them is touch. And touch is much more important than we realize. And if, for instance, the young woman who's sitting there, if I put her in an MRI machine and show her a threat scenario, her amygdala lights up. Now, if she's holding my hand and I'm a stranger to her, her amygdala lights up, but not as much. If she's holding her partner's hand and we show the threat scenario, her amygdala barely lights up at all. And even more interesting, the degree to which her amygdala does not light up is directly proportional to how she rates the quality of the relationship. You know, that is some of the power of touch. With touch, if August will come up here for a minute, August knows me, I'm a friend, and if I just put my hands on August's shoulders like that, he's getting a little release of oxytocin, a little release of endorphins, and his frontal lobes are relaxing a little bit, and he can concentrate a little bit better just by that kind of touch. And there's a fascinating study out there that shows that the basketball teams that touch the most do the best. It is an amazing study. And Kevin Garnett, after he shoots a foul shot, within less than half a second, he's touched all his teammates. Now, synchronous movement. If we take this room, divide it randomly into two groups, and ask, the group over here to walk around the building, just walk around the building, that's all, just maybe once or twice. And we take the other half and ask you to walk around the building once or twice, but to walk in lockstep. That's all, just walk in lockstep. Then have you come back, do economic trust games. The group that walked in lockstep will trust each other much more. And there's a great experiment done by Robin Dunbar's group in England, and they took rowers and put them on rowing machines where you can control for work output. And lo and behold, when the rowers were rowing together, their pain threshold went way up. Even though same work output as when they were rowing on the ergometer alone. Pain threshold went way up. He thinks that it's good evidence for synchronous movement, triggers endorphins, among other things. Now, music, and what is music? And there's a great debate right now. If you're interested, look up Gary Marcus. He just wrote a book called Guitar Zero, and there's a great debate between Gary Marcus and Jeff Miller, The Mating Mind, about is music an adaptation or is music a byproduct? And Steve Pinker, Gary Marcus think that music is a byproduct. Jeff Miller, Charles Darwin thought that music was actually an adaptation. One way or the other, all of us know that music is quite powerful. And it does all sorts of things to our brain, but primarily triggers endorphins. Now, I want to do a little experiment here. Has anybody got a birthday today? Anybody? Anybody got a birthday tomorrow? Anybody got a birthday this coming week? Okay, come on up here. Anybody else got a birthday this week? Anybody had a birthday last week? Anybody got a birthday in 2 weeks? Okay, well, August, come on up here. I need you. So let me have I need two people to come up here with me. All right. Who had the birthday? He's coming. Where is he? All right, come on. I can't see with the light. Where is he? Where is he? You just became a born. Okay. All right. Where is he? All right, let's come on up. And your name, sir? Matthew Nelson. All right. Now, what I'd like you to do is find some skin on your wrist or hand and really crank down on it. Find your pain thresholds. All right? Really find where those pain thresholds are. All right? Yeah. Really find where really crank down on it hard. Everybody, make it really hurt. Come on, let's get it really good. Now, I'm going to make you self-conscious. What I'd like people to do is I want everybody to stand, put your arms around the people next to you, and we're going to start swaying, synchronous movement, and we're going to sing 2 verses of Happy Birthday. All right, let's go. Bear with me. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a little crazy, but come on, let's go. We'll do it, all right? And it's Matthew. All right, so we're going to start with Happy Birthday to August, and then we're going to do Happy Birthday to Matthew. All right, so let's start swaying, get a good hold, get that touch going, get the synchronous movement going. Let's go. Let's go. All right, now, first verse. Happy birthday to you. Come on, August, sing. Happy birthday to you. Come on and belt it out. Happy birthday, dear August. Happy birthday to you. Now let's give it for Matthew. Come on, give it up for Matthew. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Matthew. Happy birthday to you. Give yourself a hand. All right. Thank you, Matthew. Happy birthday. All right? Now, go back to that area where you were pinching and try to find your pain threshold. How many of you notice a difference? Okay, now it's an uncontrolled experiment. Maintain your skepticism. Anybody, how many of you notice a little difference? Okay, that's 2 verses to Happy Birthday, made me kind of self-conscious. Imagine doing something like that for 12, 14 hours, all through the dark nights on the savannas, or in the outback in Australia, on the Andaman Islands. That's the nature of religion. That's the crucial part, I think. And we now know, I think, if you look at the early religions, and if you just even look at group behavior, with us, that what our ancestors discovered was this crucial biotechnology that boosted all these neurotransmitters, all these hormones and neurotransmitters, which are crucial for trust, connection, self-esteem, mood, and that the original religions were solidly based on this because that helped solve a lot of the problems of group living. This is the essence, I think, of religion. This is what solidifies belief. And if you look at any religion, and just think of the modern religions, they all contain echoes of that original religion. So when you see this kind of thing, I want you to think of it as a synchronous dance, men touching each other. We think of Buddha, this is Buddhism. And of course, the Wailing Wall. And you've seen this picture earlier. Anybody here know why there are pews in Christian churches? They were put in the 16th century to stop the dancing. Seriously. And so what did we do? We created carnival. The politicians got control of the churches, and we moved out into the street and created Mardi Gras and Carnival. So, I hope that I have shown you the cognitive structures and some of what goes into the ritual. And I want to end with this. And if you can't see the the caption. It says, "I wish you would make up your mind, Mr. Dickens. Was it the best of times or was it the worst of times? It could scarcely have been both." And I think we want to agree with Mr. Dickens, because I think it is the worst of times and the best of times. It's the worst of times in that all we have to do is turn on the news, look at a newspaper, and it is ablaze with how religion still poisons our politics, retards science, and how religion, I think is probably the main barrier to a global civil society. So I think it's the worst of times. Yet, I think it is also the best of times. And why? Because, if I have done my work well, I hope I have shown you, we are the first generations in the history of the world, the first generations that have before us now the foundation, the double helix, the basics for a comprehensive psychological science of religious belief. It is out there now. It's just filling in the details. And I think it's the best of times because that leaves us really with just 3 questions. What am I going to do with that knowledge? What are you going to do with that knowledge? What are our societies, our scientifically literate societies, going to do with this knowledge for the coming generations? Thank you very much. Thank you.